Good afternoon. This is Dmitry Sitkovetsky, and we're continuing my series called Transformation, the Art of Reinvention in the Time of the Pandemic. We finally have a real living composer of great distinction, Alexander Raskatov, who is talking to us from France. And welcome, Alexander, please.
Thank you very much, Dmitry. I am very delighted.
Thank you so much for coming to us. I know, like for me, but especially for you, it's not your first language. So if you need any kind of translation along the way, I'll be your interpreter.
Thank you.
At any time, but your English is very good. So
I think I became Robinson Crusoe. I forgot my own language, but I didn't learn neither English nor French.
That's what used to happen actually to my wave of immigration in the late 70s. You know, they would come to America and they would not yet learn English, but already started to lose Russian. So they would use English words in Russian. I personally hate that. Oh, we already have a special question, which I will come back as a second question for sure. I already have a question right online. So the first question traditionally is obvious, coming from the theme of the talks. You probably never spend as much time at home consistently as in 2020. What new have you learned about yourself during the pandemic? What has been a positive lesson from being at home?
It's a very strange experience for us, for all of us.
Yeah.
Actually, I think as a composer, it was fantastic opportunity to me, but it was always my direction living here in the West, just to try to learn myself better. Who am I? Where are my roots from? I think for performer, for singer, for violinist, it maybe you know, you practice, but for a composer, to be in vacuum, you have a deal already with something which is written as a text. But for somebody who has just a paper, music paper, it's not that easy, because on the other hand, you really, a composer has really to be alone, but on the other hand, sometimes we need a kind of recharge. You know, we need a kind of milieu, comme on dit en français. It means a certain atmosphere, because from ex nihilo, it cannot be done after several months or years. It's just impossible to create something from yourself without any contact with human beings. So maybe I'm the peculiar nature, because creature, because creature, yes, because on one hand, I'm alone when I write something. Mostly I write, but I cannot write 24 hours a day. And when I'm not alone, when I'm not writing, when I do not write, I need certain contacts. And otherwise, somehow, step by step, it's getting very complicated. You need to change. Composer need to change. And in this point, it's fantastic to be completely dedicated to work, to be totally in this field. What, for instance, I'm working on the opera. It's fantastic that I don't hear anything, anybody on the street and in the street. But sometimes it disturbs me a little bit, because I have a feeling that I'm somehow actually who needs it. I don't understand for whom I'm writing.
Yeah. You lose a little bit the contact with my type of people, with performers, because, you know, performers could also respond to, even while you're writing, you know, they might have a different idea and this and that. It's always important to have some kind of a you know, give and take, and even just exchanging some interesting stories about, like we had. You're the first person that I consider my gain my pandemic game, because we never met in
Never.
before pandemic. We only talked on the phone for hours, and we enjoyed very much, and then also on Zoom.
Yeah.
And so this is a new way of also meeting people, forming, creative alliances, working together. So there has been some positives in that as well. It's not only, but it's interesting. Before there is a question I will go, but there is one that actually my wife posted, who is a colleague of your wife. She's a professional singer, opera singer, and now a teacher. But she asked me to ask you this, and it's sort of connected to what you were talking about. How does a young musician feel compelled to start writing music down and desire to be a composer? How does it start? How did it happen to you? And what was your instrument initially?
It's everybody has his own experience. With me, it was like that. I started learning theory in so-called Merzlikovsky College in Moscow.
I know it well. Yeah.
So I was 15 when I entered the college, and for me it was maybe the best time of a certain point of my life, in period of my education. I even think it was more valuable than conservatory in certain point. There are fantastic professors, Kholopov. Well, there are so many names which maybe people who will listen us or see us do not know, but it was a fantastic atmosphere. But I just started with theory and history of music, but then suddenly I read Dr. Faustus Thomas Mann, and somehow it opened for me a kind of new world, this book. The most funny thing is that I was never influenced by New Vienna School, but as a composer in the future. But this book for me was a shock, and I consider this book as a reason, as a kind of booster, which gave me very suddenly a wish to try to do something myself, not just to learn harmony or theory of music, but so it was. I think I was maybe 16, 17. So it's not. I was not very young to start.
With. But before that, you played piano just at the very beginning.
I played piano. I played piano as many theoreticians, and I loved it. And in conservatory, I had a fantastic professor, Ilya Klitschko, who was even it was not my specialty, but he, as a professor of piano, gave me a lot. And just to go for a while back concerning your question, in the beginning, yes, to know myself better. I remember my also telephone friend, Dmitry Kurtog, told me once by phone, because he speaks Russian, actually.
Really? Yes. Kurtak speaks Russian. Oh, that's
speaks Russian. And he told me, I told him, I asked him, dear, I'm here in the West. What shall I do? Maybe I have to change something in myself, because it's totally new, another musical field surrounds me. And he told, no, you don't need to change, doesn't change anything, just try to know yourself better. It was a fantastic answer. He was, by the way, I'm really very much appreciated his friendship. He gave me the first prize of composition in Osterfestspiele 98 in Salzburg. And from that period, something started to happen in my life. So I try when I'm at home in this period, but it was before. Now it's maybe more concentrated. Just I have time to ask myself certain very important questions. Of course, where I'm from, why I'm here, what sort of music shall I write? Why this? Why not that? And it's very important not to be disturbed by everyday little events, small events. And I think as everybody, we in every minus we have to find a plus.
Yeah,
So
absolutely, absolutely. I think also what was behind my wife's question is how that impulse to write things out, rather, because most kids like to perform. Yeah, even if you play what they call
yeah,
dogs
yeah,
vals, yeah, sabati
yes,
vals, yeah. They always show, oh, look what my little kid could do, or a few out of tune notes, twinkle
right.
twinkle little star, and all at every, so they always put as performers. And was that how you, at some point, where your interest actually shifted to a much more solitary and much more, unknown world of the sounds that you heard only in your head or on the paper, rather than something that's already on the page and you can play or whatever, that, I think that's what you meant.
Yeah, actually, there are normally I think there is a combination of different little circumstances,
Uh-huh.
not just because one book or one
Of
film
course.
or,
Yeah.
for instance, my musical education somehow started. Of course, I knew some very popular classical music in former times. It was very easy. Radio
Yeah.
always translated fantastic concerts when I was 6, 7, 8 years old. But then somehow my musical education started with late quartets by Beethoven. So
Mhm.
suddenly I came without like socialistic revolution, just from this to this, from feudalism
From one extreme to
directly
the,
to socialism.
yeah,
So
yes,
I,
yes, yes.
and till now, everybody, of course, it's a very special part of our musical heritage, but for me, it was also kind of totally uh, kind of musical shock, if you want. And I listened 100 times Cavatina from Quartet Number 13 or whatever, and
Very sophisticated. At what age? What? How old were you?
like, well, 13, 14 years
Wow,
old.
wow,
And
that's very advanced.
I felt that I felt something, let's say,
Yes,
because
yes.
there is always a certain mystery you cannot avoid. Not It's impossible to explain just with words. But I we didn't have a class of composition in Merzlikovsky College. We had a
Yeah,
kind of facultative with very
right.
good, a little bit skeptical professor, Konstantin Batashov, who gave me much more than I received in conservatory in certain class of a composer who win the Stalin Prize in the for his violin concerto with performance of your father. I mean Albert Lehman.
That was Lemon. Yeah, 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 yeah. That was later. Yes, yes. With the help,
Yes,
with the serious
it
help
was
of
much
my
later.
father. Yes, that was
Yes.
Lemon. Yes, but it's interesting
I,
because you
I,
mentioned.
I wish, I wish, I wish, I wish Lemon could help me as much as your father helped
Helped
him,
him. Yeah.
because yes,
Well, the
because I
way
cannot say I learned. I cannot
that
say I learned a lot.
not a great deal. It's interesting because I would imagine it's very difficult to teach, apart from technique, orchestration, and voicing and counterpoint. You can learn all of that, but to teach how to how to compose is virtually impossible. I know a wonderful story. I'll try to translate it into English, but it sounds fantastic in Russian. How this was a wonderful professor in Baku Conservatory, and he's having a student coming, playing something in the bass. And he said, what are you doing? He said, and the student says, well, I'm afraid the symphony will come out. He said, don't worry. Don't be afraid. It won't. It won't. Боюсь, симфония получится. Он говорит, не бойся. Получится. Don't be afraid. It won't happen. Now, speaking of Russian, I have this question. I will read it to you in Russian, and then I will translate. This has just come in as we started. I will read it to you in Russian so you could start thinking of what you want to say, and then I'll translate. Расскажите о произведении «Ритуал», созданном под впечатлением дисков «Голоса мира». Чем была вызвана реакция слушателей, разделившихся на тех, кто восхищался, и тех, кто негодовал? Авангардная музыка, композитор, авангардист. Приемлемы ли эти определения ныне? Это как бы вторая часть вопроса. While you think, let me just translate so the English speakers know what I just, what the question. The question is from one of our listeners here, who would please tell us about your work called Ritual, created after the impression of the disc of Voices of the World. What was the reaction from the public provoked? Half of them loved it and admired it, and the others were quite angered by it. And then the second part of the question is, what is avant-garde music and what is composer avant-gardiste? Is it still relevant in today's world? It's a very good question. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Very good question. Very good question, because actually I wanted to touch this composition somehow in our conversation. Firstly, I wanted to tell that, as we say, everything new is well forgotten old. I don't know how to translate it into English, but something like that.
Exactly.
So when I was 19 years old, maybe the only positive thing which I had a chance to receive from conservatory was my folk trip in a little group of small group of composers and musicologists to so-called area of Don Kazakhs. So it's near Volgograd region, maybe 1,000 kilometers from Moscow. Big river Don.
Yeah, Stavropol also in that region. Stavropol, the city Stavropol. Stavropol also in Kazakh. Yeah. Where Gorbachev came from.
Yeah. But I came more to the north of Don Kazakhs, not southern Kazakhs, but Don. And for me, it was shock. Really, second time I already mentioned this, use this word, but I could not expect that such kind of culture could exist. It was the beginning of 70s. Firstly, for all my life, I received the enormous attraction for the voice itself. As voice is actually, voice is a basement of Russian musical culture, actually. Musical culture, the church, folk. Foundation. Yes, right. Exactly. Yeah, thank you. And for instance, 4 men just drinking a little bit of vodka, they could start singing. They see each other maybe 2 times a year or 3 times a year because they work. But once there is a fest, they meet and they start singing so complicated music that it was impossible for anybody to decipher it. So we had 4 recorders, and everybody. It's a pity because we didn't have a final result on the tape. Just everybody recorded one of these 4 guys, and it was more like a conversation. It was not a real singing, but it was something which I've never heard before. Why I mention this? Because later, many years ago, maybe, I don't know, 25 years ago, when I received the proposition to write a piece for a voice for Cité de la Musique in France. My wife, Elena Vasilieva, she was going to give a master class, so-called Cétoscopie de la voix, which means, well, using of different sorts of musical devices. And and I took text of by Велимир Хлебников, «Голоса и песни улицы», voices
and songs
of the street. Yes, and I decided to write music for voice solo on this text, but somehow by coincidence I bought at the same time this fantastic set of discs, Le Voix du Monde, the voices of the world, and I understood that avant-garde in voice doesn't exist at all, because what we think avant-garde is actually existed already thousands years before.
Prehistoric.
I don't know, all combinations, voice with instrument which imitates the voice, or voice which imitates instrument. It was such a treasure for me. So I decided to write this piece, which when Yelena should sing in megaphone, at the same time beating, how to say, the timpani with a mallet, and the voice which was transformed. But it was not absolutely not technology, not technology for the sake of technology. I just was thinking that it can provide a totally new sound, like a little bit Tibetan, how to Tibetan,
like those incredible
monks, but singing by women. And when it was performed at Locking House, I couldn't expect, because for me it was just tradition. What I saw, what I listened in these discs, I did not copy anything, but I tried to create something like techno ethno, let's say, something, because there is a megaphone, there is a timpani, and but at the same time the idea of music was kind of renaissance of ethno through my ears. And it was really kind of shocking. Auditorium, half of auditorium shouting bravo, and half and some of them just how to say
enraged,
throw in me notes.
Really?
No, it's not bottom notes.
Yeah, a program notes. That's
or 7 or 8 times we were on the stage, and I could not expect that this piece, which was just written absolutely sincerely without any epotage, became kind of epotage. But the most funny thing was next day. I was so I was like that after the concert, because till midnight people were on the Parkplatz near their Mercedes and BMW discussing, and it was a real quarrel between who was against, who was for. And next day, one old man came to me, German tall man, came to me and he told Mr. Raskatov, "This is for you," and he gave me his postcard, and he wrote something in German. I read, "Lieber Herr Raskatov," actually, it was, it's important, don't be upset with somebody who actually, because remember Stravinsky, compliments.
Yeah.
But don't be upset. Then I turned the visit card just to know who was this guy, and I wrote Eric, I don't know, Müller, professor of nervous and psychiatric disease in München. So in this context, it was very funny. Professor, doctor of psychiatry.
Yeah, but in case it does make such an impression on you, you can come and see me. Then I will help you. Yeah, if it makes it
something like that. So that was the story. That was the story with ritual. But then it was recorded. Then it was performed several times. But it was the biggest scandal in my life, this locking house, because people come to listen just normal.
Oh, yeah, there's some contemporary
in
music too,
brackets,
but that was,
modern.
it obviously hit the nerve.
Yeah,
It hit the nerve of the public and divided. I think you're in very good company with Stravinsky and with some of the others, but also, it reminded me of when you said all new is well forgotten old. And once I had a great fortune to be allowed to see the Montignan-Lascaux, that 16,000-year-old, the prehistoric paintings on the rock of the 16,000 years. It was only discovered just before Second World War, and it's in this beautiful area of France, sort of, Vézère and the Périgord Noir around there. And when Picasso, he went to see it and to see the real thing. Now you can only see the copy because of, they're trying to preserve it. And he said when he saw those incredible, prehistoric painting done on the rock. So it's not just like there was no paint, but they did it in color, and they only put the animals that they never killed, that they never ate. So they were sacred. And what they did, in fact, was a multiple, it's what we see in cartoons. They crossing the river. So you see this stage and this stage and this stage, 16,000 years ago, the fantasy. So when Picasso saw it, he said, oh, now I see my masters, the ones. So he related. Of course, he was a big showman, but he did have a direct relationship to this. So all of the modern paintings was done already by those geniuses who spent, I don't know how many weeks and months just carving, and they were absolutely beautiful and in color, just crossing the river from one side to the next. You actually saw them in motion. It's something way above anything. So it's absolutely true that you saw all these the folk songs and how they communicate to each other is great. So let's touch upon second part of the question, avant-gardism. What is a composer who, is there anybody today that could be called avant-gardist? The way, let's say, Stockhausen was considered avant-gardist, before him Boulez, and there were various avant-gardists in various times. But today, do we have anybody, in your opinion, what would be a term of an avant-garde composer?
This term, I think, exists already for how many years? I don't know. Maybe after the Second World War, maybe 75, 80 years. But I don't know any musical style or tendency which could exist so long time. Sometimes I ask myself, what will be after contemporary music? What will be after? Because it's impossible that many people still consider Prokofiev as a modern contemporary composer. It was 100 years ago, and still it is contemporary. Everybody was contemporary. Schubert was contemporary to his time. Beethoven was contemporary to his time, etc., etc. And for me, this term is absolutely, I would say, of course, it's very important to find word so we understand what I understand what do you mean, or you understand what somebody else means, just because it makes conversation easier. But the term itself, for my opinion, is absolutely wrong, because Beethoven was avant-gardist in his big grosse fuga, or Bach in his many of his compositions, or I don't know. And Gesualdo was super avant-gardist for the voice and his madrigals. So it's this term existed in already in 100 years, if we can say so. So for me, to be avant-gardist means to tell the truth nothing, because it's just a word, convenient word to be understood or to understand. I don't know, but I think that contemporary music, this term, maybe COVID will help to this. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but I still say as a kind of exprompt that COVID will help to this term to die.
I understand.
Because
become irrelevant, become useless. For this term to become useless. What is contemporary? I mean, what is avant-gardist? I mean, we all in the same sort of fermata. You know, we're really having almost a year-long fermata, and we have no idea when this fermata, which is a pregnant pause for all of us musicians, not only musicians, all the performers, it's been a holding pattern. You know, of course, in Italian, the Italians do not use that word. When I do my rehearsals, it's very curious, because I speak a little bit Italian enough to do rehearsals in Italian, because I love the language and all that. So you should never say fermata. Fermata is a bus stop. Fermata. When you go and there is a bus stop, that's called fermata.
Yes.
What we call fermata is corona, interestingly enough. Corona, which means above.
Corona.
So now we have this corona as a grand fermata for us, you know. So it's play on Italian words, you know. This corona has been our fermata. I wonder if they will. Once I heard a fantastic play on Italian words by, I think it was Benvenuto Cellini, who wrote to Napoleon, not the great Napoleon, but to one of his you know, successors, Napoleon III, let's say. He wanted to get some of the great Florentine paintings back, because of course Napoleon, when he took Florence, he took. And so what he wrote, he said, well, I'm not saying that all French are thieves, ma buona parte, sì, which means, but most of them, yes. Buona parte, big part of them, sì. Brilliant.
It's fantastic. It's fantastic.
I heard it from a wonderful, you know, custodian of a church in Florence, because he said, do you know who stayed on the corner here? I said, no. He said, buona parte. And then he told me this, who stole quite a bit. So I'm not saying all of them are thieves. Ma buona parte, sì. I love
very good.
So this corona is a grand fermata for us. Yes.
Anyway. Actually, you know, Dima, actually we have just to divide. Contemporary music is always contemporary. I mean, it lives
in our time.
Yeah, in our time. But sometimes it has a kind of double, very, I would say, negative context. Contemporary music means music which lives in its time and at the same time dies in this time, because it doesn't go further. It's also possible.
It's not the music of the future. I understand. Speaking of,
on the other hand, is that avant-gardism, avant-garde existed in all periods of music, but they just did not use this word because it was useless, not necessary.
And to be, well, this one. I mean, Beethoven was an avant-gardist even with first Razumovsky quartet, which created a stir.
Yes,
and the first violinist Chopin thought he was making a joke. So what do you mean the quartet starts with the cello and all
Yeah.
these high notes? And what is this? Yeah, but so everything was relative. Now it's the classic compared to the late quartets. It's
Yes, of course,
walk in the park. Let me ask you some of the other questions. You said, who were the most important influences in your life as a composer? I read the names of Mussorgsky, Shostakovich, and Schnittke. Anyone else? And maybe you expand on those names. In which way?
Now, in different times, we all are certain different influences. It's normal. It's alive. When I was in conservatory, I remember there was a period when I just dreamed about Bartok. Bartok was everything for me. And as I told before, I started just suddenly in the age of 13 years listening to the late quartets of Beethoven, and till now it's for me is kind of musical Bible. It's very banal truism, but I have to say so. And what is interesting, then when I lived in Moscow, we all were very interested to know what is going on here. Wanted to know, I don't know, Xenakis or Jacinto Chelsea or whatever. And we didn't have in former times, we didn't have so much musical information. Access, yes.
Yeah.
But when I came here, it's like a thread which I wanted to tie. I mean, from the east to west, I wanted to know, for instance, Xenakis and Chelsea. But now when I'm here, I try to understand much better and what was important for me according to searching for my roots. And that's why Mussorgsky and Shostakovich took absolutely another musical space in my mind than it was before, I would say. For instance, Shostakovich, I have to say especially about Shostakovich, for me, it's a wonder as his music without any never artificial never technology as the sake of technology, sometimes just two notes and you know that it's Shostakovich.
Shostakovich, yeah, it's DNA right away. Yeah, it's like a fingerprint. Yeah,
absolutely. And maybe it's the biggest monument of epoch of 20th century. I just wanted to mention two works, not so maybe famous as the 7th or 8th symphony. Like wanted to mention the 6th symphony, by the way, in H-moll, which is very strange association with last symphony of Tchaikovsky, the same tonality. And I think nobody, when I listen to this music, especially here, I feel that nobody in the history of music could not impress so much the feeling of fear of the first movement is just like waiting for somebody who will come, as Mandelstam wrote, всю ночь напролет жду гостей дорогих. I don't know how to say it.
Yeah. So, all night long I wait for dear guests who will knock on my door and will take you to Gulag one way.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what
Physical fear. Physical
fear, for instance, in this symphony, especially in the first movement. Then just another example, I was in the world premiere of his 13 quartet, which for me was something, till now I cannot forget this impression of the last very high C bemol, a very strange quartet which finished without violoncello, just two violins and alt, lowest, highest B flat. And so just these examples shows me now, especially the composer, without especially his reason to have a reason to build a monument of epoch, build it. And for me, so in certain point, I'm very proud that somehow I and we all belong to the same musical nation, I would say.
Absolutely.
The same with Schnittke. Of course, Schnittke needed another sort of ears to understand what he meant. And his period of 80s, 70s or 80s, maybe he wrote his music for a certain class of audience, which maybe disappeared a little bit now because many people left, died, and but still it's also a certain monument of a certain period of our country. So this idea just to tie these two threads, one from the east to west, another from the west to east, I feel it. So it depends on my also physical existence here. And so maybe I don't know, I replied on your question in this.
No, you did. And I can also say from my own experience, as far, I say that I lived my first 20 years, 21 almost years, in the time of Shostakovich. You see, like the same as people would say that I lived in Vienna at the beginning of the 19th century at the time of Beethoven. Clearly, I mean, that was the dominating figure, artistically, musically and all that. But that's not how I felt when I was there. Because we always wanted to, everybody knew he was composer #1, but he also got all the government prizes, and he signed all the letters against the dissidents and everything. Now we know how he did it. But anyway, he signed anything that was put in front of him, just to get rid of them. But, we were too young. And sometimes, you need a certain distance. When you're next to a giant, you can't quite see. There is a wonderful image that Stephen Fry once described. I want to give him copyright, but he said, have you ever, I said, if you go down on, let's say, 7th Avenue or 6th Avenue in New York, down Manhattan, and you in the taxi, but you look back and you see all these skyscrapers getting further and further from you, but you finally realize how giant they are. You need a distance. In other words, he meant it for Oscar Wilde, that the further we are from Oscar Wilde, the more we, so the same could be said about Shostakovich, because we were there. I saw all of the important premieres of it, but we didn't realize that he really was a contemporary Beethoven. Whether we like his music, or I actually, at that time, I preferred, and I still love Prokofiev's music, for instance. It was always my first love. For some reason, they always juxtaposed the two. I don't know why, because it's like, it's like, do you like pears or apples? And if you love pears, you have to hate apples. Why? You have to. So anyway, I think in the migration, when you don't live there and you have a certain distance, then you realize what a giant he was, and what influence he had really on us. But of course, you mentioned Bartok, and Bartok obviously was the one I was thinking of when you described your trip to the Don's Cossacks, how you were trying to capture their folk melodies, and then somehow incorporate them in some of. That's what he did around Transylvania and Hungary and Romania and all of that, because it's ultimately the most interesting, I would imagine, for a composer to get to the source. Let me ask you about maybe the most well-known work for people who don't know you. How did the opera Dog's Heart, Собачье сердце, came about? Was it your choice, or the commission specifically was tied in with Bulgakov's famous novel? Tell us a little bit about that.
Funny story. I was in Amsterdam with the premiere of my orchestration of Songs and Dances of the Death. I had the kind of courage to repeat this after already Shostakovich gave fantastic example of orchestration, but it was a commission, so I orchestrated this with also 3 interludes of myself between these 4 movements. And actually, suddenly, after the concert, one man was totally in black, came to me and he told Pierre Audi, director of Dano, would you be interested to write an opera? What do you think? I told, well, everybody would be interested to write an opera. I think he told me, I think it's the right moment for you to do it. Firstly, I didn't realize that the director of such important opera house suddenly proposed me to write an opera. And then I realized it, and he gave me he told, okay, today is, I don't know, Tuesday, in 2 days we meet in Paris, you give me your idea about what it is, what it could be. So I had just a couple of days, and somehow immediately I came to the idea, I don't know why, Dog's Heart. And I told him about it, and he was upset. He didn't know. No. But he, of course, he read it, and he gave me a green light to write it. So so that's what was a story. And then I think the Dog's Heart had a good how to say, destiny, but it maybe would be better if not the relative of Bugakos family who totally blocked Metropolitan and Mariinsky Theater, not to mention some other theaters not so important. So it means that it was performed in 2 times in not 2 times, but I mean Amsterdam, then it was in English National Opera, then it was in La Scala, and then it was in Lyon, and back reprise in recapitulation, how to say, in Amsterdam. So 2 times in Amsterdam. And unfortunately, those countries who were interested, United States and Russia, because of special law concerning the opus post-mortem, so it's very complicated. And I spent a lot of time with a lawyer who was a lawyer also of Bulgakov, but firstly he is a lawyer of Mrs. Irina Shostakovich, certain Metro Schmidt, and Irina Antonovna kindly gave me this contact. By the way, she came 2 times to listen to this opera in Amsterdam and both in La Scala, and she supported me. I'm very grateful to her. But anyway, with Metro Schmidt, it was impossible to get to certain conclusion with this guy, because he in America and in Russia it's forbidden, it's under copyrights till 95 years after the first printing, how to say.
Really, the first edition of
first edition, yes, not 70 years after the death of the writer, as usually we think.
Yeah, normally
because it was never edited during his life. So we have to start calculation not from his death, but from the first
printing, the first edition. First
edition was officially in 87. So before it was in Inca Press in 69, but it doesn't help a lot. Anyway, I think that yes, and that's why Mr. Shilovsky asked for a price with 5 zeros, not in ruble, of course. So it gives me a strange idea, this so-called copyrights in our time, what it would be in 19th century if Tchaikovsky should ask permission of relatives of Pushkin or Mozart from Beaumarchais. Maybe a lot of great operas would never exist.
Never exist.
And this is what really composers now are suffering from, because we don't know. We are just slaves of certain people who just wanted to forbid, and that's it. I think he was so proud that I think he was so proud that he broke this possibility for Metropolitan to perform this opera to Gergiev, and etc., etc. So this is half successful, half unsuccessful story about Dog's Heart, which how to say, I think it's typical Bugakov story itself.
Absolutely, because it was very much in Bugakov's style of, you know, mysterious and unexplainable circumstances. But what kills me is that, so it's not just there, it's also many estates now, the children, grandchildren, or people not even related to those people, you know, to the real composers. If they only knew, if the composer's voice could be heard from the better world, he would fire all of them, because all the composers, all the writers, they want to be heard, read, seen, and performed as much as possible in every possible way. So any, you know, break for that, something that breaks many performances, it denies people of the knowledge of Bulgakov, because you know, okay, for us Bulgakov is just, you know, it's just maybe one of the most important writers of the 20th century, but not for everybody in New York, not for everybody in other places. You know, they don't know it, and they probably don't know Dog's Heart. But there comes the opera, you know, in a way the most accessible of art, and they would get, and then maybe they would read the novel and everything. It's a win-win, and they would make their money. Pardon me. They would make their money. It's just greed, and it's a power play. I think these people should be forbidden to speak on behalf of great geniuses. They pretend to, you know, to decide. Who are they? What qualifies?
Absolutely. As the most funny thing that this guy is absolutely not direct relative of Shilovsky, of Bulgakov, because Bulgakov didn't have any children, you know. So it was Yelena Sergeyevna who had Serezha from another marriage, and then Serezha produced, born this another Serezha, who is my how to say, my friend. So this Serezha, Sergey, I don't know what it is. It's kind of vendetta to his real grandfather, who was not Mikhail Afanasievich, but another person. So I don't know. I don't know actually, because, for instance, if to talk about money, Messerschmitt proved that he would receive much more that he wanted from Metropolitan, and but it didn't work at all. It was
It was destructive. Yeah, it's just, when I heard it long before we met, when I thought, oh my God, I can't believe how anti-creative, anti-human. There's nothing positive about it. It's all against the, as you said, Tchaikovsky wouldn't have written Onegin or Pigdam if there was a question of copyright. Right. And you know, Puccini wouldn't have written Bohème, and you know, all the Verdi's, most of the, you know, they're all based on
Shostakovich would not write maybe
Liskov, because of Liskov, yeah, Lady Macbeth, and so forth and so forth. It's just crazy, you know. Those people, they have no idea what creative process. Let's go back to some of the questions. There was a question earlier. Your Kaddish, another work of yours, Kaddish, is dedicated to Belyaev. Who do you think today in modern Russia who could be called a patron of the arts, if you consider Belyaev being patron of the arts?
You know, actually, this disc is dedicated to memory of Belyaev, but but my piece, Gebet Kaddish, is dedicated to the memory of, in memory of my father, who died. It's already, I think it's the second work which I wrote in Hebrew, in spite I don't speak this language. There is a recording, with wonderful recording of this piece. For me, it's important work. And as for Belayev, I think he was very this sort of personage as Belayev, or I don't know, Medici or whoever, I don't know, Erzherzog Rudolf.
Yeah.
It was very in all period of history.
Razumovsky,
Razumovsky, but not Golitsyn, who
not
never paid.
no, just Razumovsky. Yeah, exactly.
Razumovsky. So I mean, it was very rare in all the periods of the history of music. Real mécène who does not care. He trusts. But Belayev is a very rare case, I suppose. And as for today, to tell the truth, I know that there are certain tendency to buy football teams, but I don't know about music. I think such people as Belayev belong to the past, when our music was really highly appreciated, and because of him, he how to say, he wanted to support the most important Russian composers of his time, like Rachmaninoff and the early Stravinsky, Scriabin, of course. And he gave a possibility to those who come later also to be supported by him post-mortem. But it's a good question, which I don't have answer. Unanswered question.
It's an answered question. Let's a reference to Ives. Yeah, because there were not only performers who were so important for the life of so many compositions, but also in the figure of like Kusevitsky, for instance, who was already publishing still back in Russia when he was a young man, soon after he started conducting, and it wasn't even his conducting related, he was already publishing early works of Rachmaninoff and Scriabin and so forth. And then when he came to Paris, his second part of his life was in Paris, he started Saison Russe. Not Ballet Russe, which was Dagler, but Saison Russe. And he's the one, for instance, who had an idea of orchestration of pictures at an exhibition of Mussorgsky. It was him who gave the piece. I don't think Ravel even knew that work, and he gave him the score. And there are some even mistakes which were in that particular edition, and there's still mistakes in the orchestration because he worked with whatever he was given. He made tremendous amount of commissions once he came to America. And he commissioned Concerto for Orchestra by Bartok and Peter Grimes and many important. So I think those are the catalysts, catalysts which are so important. They, they're not only the performers, but they also become, if they can publish, they can really put somebody on the map. There are very few people now who can do that. Speaking of, there was another question there. What is your relationship? Because you worked with various publishers, and of course we know in the past, the relationship, let's say, of Tchaikovsky and Jurgenson, or Brahms and Breitkopf and Hartl and so forth. It was very important, and also for the writers. You always hear Tolstoy and his publisher, or Dostoevsky and his publisher, and so forth. It's very, very important from Beethoven on, really, from Beethoven.
Yes.
Yeah. So, what was your experience, and what is the synergy today between a composer who writes commissions, or sometimes you write what you believe in, and the publisher? How does that work?
Let me tell you from the very beginning, because it's a story. I think it was in '93. I was in Paris in Festival Présence with performance of my piece, and at the same time, my first compact disc. I was 40 years old. For me, it was a big deal. Was printed in Champ du Monde, Champ du Monde.
Champ du Monde, yeah.
Yes, and somehow this disc, by the way, in this point, Sofia Gubaidulina helped me to talk about me to Volkonsky, who received this disc, and they all, three curators, Arvo Pärt, Andrei Volkonsky, and Serge Chereplinin, decided to invite me to Belayev, who collaborated in Peters, Frankfurt.
In Frankfurt.
So they invited me. I came to Volkonsky for 1 month, talking about the life, music, etc., etc. So, and then they was a time, really horrible time in Moscow. I don't know when it was not horrible, but this time was really horrible. So it actually it was. Actually, I left Russia with the help of these three, this curatorium, and came to Germany. I lived in Germany for quite a lot of years, collaborating with publishing house Peters, with curatorium of Belayev. It's a strange combination because they didn't have their own polygraphical services, so they hired Peters as a co-partner for printing this course, and so I possibility to have all this of, I don't know, was connected with which was connected with the story of history of Belayev. So I myself was for a certain moment quite proud that I also belong to this tradition. But then of course, which was a pity, it was the best period when Arvo Pärt was there. Then Arvo Pärt left because of course he was very famous, and maybe he didn't want to spend time on the being curator. Then Volkonsky became very ill, and the situation changed not to the best. So I left for Sikorsky in Hamburg for a certain time, and then finally I found myself in Salabert in Paris. Now I live in France, and Salabert I have very good contact. It's already second opera which I give to Salabert, and
one that you're writing
what I
now. The one that you're writing now.
Yes, this one. In combination of correlations between the composer or author, let's say, a publisher, most of all I appreciate just friendly connections, not official, not how to say, formal connections, but when I by occasion I read now letters of Dostoevsky, so it's so simple, but what I cannot say about my certain experience in the past, now I found this simplicity in connection with this French publishing house, which is French, with the publishing house of Debussy, Ravel, and Xenakis. So it's important, and I appreciate very much this not formalistic contact. I think that what is important, that publisher has to know something, not about just the score X or Y, but to know who are you, what is your interest in general in the life, and I cannot say that some of my ex-publishing houses in Germany had this tendency. It sometimes just very formalist,
personal,
impersonal, and just wait, not sometimes I felt, even in one interview I told that, how to say, that manuscripts of composers just are waiting, or they that shelves of publishing houses are just a sort of crematorium for the scores, because it's just burned on, they just wait.
Yeah. Yes.
But I don't mean, for instance, Salabert is a very lucky, exceptional case for me, but don't want to say anything
Negative about it.
not politically correct to the others.
No,
But
I understand.
different. But I think this is very important, in spite of all emails. I mean, all possibilities to communicate by, I don't know. It's important to have this alive contact, like you mentioned, had Dostoevsky or Tchaikovsky, or because it's human. We have a deal with something which is very fragile. And if it's very easy to offend, just to hurt somebody with a wrong word, or with kind of neglection, I don't know what. We feel it, and that's why this is the most important, even maybe more important than just promotion. Promotion to send this and this and this, and so for me, this I appreciate very much.
Well,
And
I think that's a very important point, because for me it sort of relates to what used to be and kind of disappears now a little bit, especially with big agencies. It's the relationship between your sort of general manager for performing artists. It's not enough just to be supplying, or in order to promote you, or in order to I hate that word, in order to sell you. In other words, in order to get you a commission, they have to know you extremely well, both as a composer and also as a human being, because then they could successfully offer to a performer that they think the two will connect.
Yes, right.
And it's pretty much the same technique, or the same principle, as in order for a manager to be successful, for an artist to be able to bring engagements or to connect with an important conductor. You have to know your artist extremely well, also as a human being. Not necessarily political affiliations, but your whole sort of modus operandi, how you get out, because it is you putting together human beings with their particular quirks and likes and dislikes, and different nervous system, so to speak. And that I think is, from what I understand, the role of the publisher is extremely important, because he is it has to be your best friend, but also your best practical person to communicate to the world, to make things happen for you.
Yes, right. And by the way, another thing, for instance, in Belayev, there was it's quite rare thing, and very, I would say, dangerous, when one composer is a chief of another composer, because in certain point, these three persons, Cherepnin, maybe less, Serge Cherepnin, his brother was a composer, Ivan Cherepnin.
I knew him. Yes.
He knew. So Volkonsky and of course Arvo Pärt, and what is important is a goodwill to the colleague. I mean, Arvo Pärt was so charming and so generous personality. He was never, he did not need to be angry against somebody, or to be, I mean, I say did because in the past, because he is not curator anymore. I said did. Volkonsky also, he was very, very friendly as well as part and cheering. So it was a triumvirate, which was absolutely, I felt only goodwill from their part. But it's not always the case. That's what I learned from
No,
my
no, of
own
course.
biography.
Of course, because it becomes very competitive, and then one, it's very much even more like this in the performing world. But what it made me think that actually it's not a bad idea for the performers or for an agency, let's say for a young agent, ambitious agent, to have what you call curators. In other words, what's the role of the curator? It's the senior composer who knows already from the experience, from the position of success in the world. He said, well, this one really's got potential. And as another, so I recommend his music. That will be great. And then somebody else like Sofia Gubaidulina will say this, or Volkonsky, who certainly knew a lot of, both French and Russian culture and all that. So I think this is something that's lacking. I mean, there were some cases in America, for instance, especially Isaac Stern was big, consulting figure and deciding figure who should take the agency where he was and so forth. But and as a result, he built several generations of careers, not directly himself, but through the managers. He was the consultant, but those people are very rare in our business because everybody wants to just be on stage no matter what. Well, it's not easy to. This is a quality I've been trying to nurture more and more during the pandemic. How to be uh, happy for somebody else's success, and how to rejoice in something that once happened and it's not here anymore. Even discovering some old recordings, whether it's mine or my parents or my friends or that, it's it's good because it's part of my life anyway. So it doesn't really matter. That fills my life with joy. Otherwise, I should be all the time depressed because I'm not on stage. But as I'm not only a performer, I think I would recommend it to every performer to develop that not everything is just concentrated in you and performance. There are other things. There are other people,
Absolutely, bravo.
other ideas. There's some, as I remember a wonderful story how sometimes great ideas sort of circulate in the world, in ether, and the most sensitive of sensitive souls pick them up. The most creative. It was a story actually of a famous Russian theater director, Mark Zakharov. You knew, of course, he was for many years the chief director of Lencom, and a genius playwright who's long gone was his good friend Grigory Gorin. He once comes in to him, said, Mark, I have this fantastic idea. He said, imagine, let's do I'll write you a play about cats. He said, cats? You've got to be kidding. He said, cats. Dogs, I can see somewhere, but cats, they're so, don't come any closer. So he totally poo-pooed his idea. He killed his idea. 2 years later, the musical Cat came out. And he said, what an idiot. But what it symbolizes is how those ideas, they circulate,
Yes, yes.
in the air. And it came to very super creative Grigory Gordon. And if it were not for Mark Zakharov, and he was saying what an idiot I was at the time not to take this. But
Absolutely.
it seems like stupid. Why?
That's
So
why certain people have to have much more instinct or intuition or foresee by instinct. It's impossible to
just by
regulate.
nose. He said, "Why? There's no reason why. I just feel that way, and it should be good enough."
It's
That's how I felt many years ago when I all of a sudden I was so involved with Glenn Gould and Bach, and I thought I would write the string trio transcription of Goldberg variation.
not variation.
Everybody my agents thought I was completely out of my mind. My colleagues thought, oh, come on, this is ridiculous. What transcription's a dirty word in mid 80s? And I just knew I had to do it.
By the way, may I interrupt you? I listened to your transcription of Goldberg Variations the first time. It was in a Bashmet festival in Roland Sec. It was in 92, something like that. Maybe 92, 91, maybe 91.
Was I playing? Was I playing? Or was somebody else? Who was
I think it was somebody else.
Somebody else.
It was not you. Because for me, Goldberg Variations, by the way, it's also epoch, and Glenn Gould is something which we have to speak one day special. But I totally understand that it's possible just to be under this fleur of Goldberg Variations in context of Glenn Gould, and not to sleep. So I remember this.
Yeah.
I remember it was wonderful performance, but I don't remember who, but somebody from Bashmet's team.
Yeah, because one time I did it at his festival, but that was before. I think it must have been 88 or 89. I did it in 80. I performed it for the first time in 84, and it was published in 85. And as a result, there's there's more string players who's played Goldbergs than keyboard players, because for keyboard, whether it's piano or because that's my fault. Yeah, that's my fault. But there's hundreds of people who have no idea that I play or conduct, that I'm even alive. They have no idea, but they do know Goldberg Variations anyway.
That's it's fantastic.
It's just something, but everybody was poo-pooing it like this. I'm glad I didn't get discouraged. There's certain things, you just have to do it.
You achieved your goal.
Yeah, I just had to do it. I didn't care if nobody played it, if it was a complete disaster. You just have to do it. Now let me ask you one more, because we're already, it's 5:15 my time, so it's 6:50. I don't want to keep you indefinitely, but we could talk for forever, but probably
yes,
our listeners already. Yeah, let me ask you. Yes, interesting for me. I mean, there's a number of questions we won't get through today, but how important, we talked about performers as well. You mentioned once, because you've written for some of the most famous performers today. It's Yuri Bashmet, Gidon Kremer, Valery Gergiev, Vadim Repin, Sabine Meyer, Hilliard Ensemble, and so forth. Yet, I heard you say that today, the composers are almost have to write for different performers, as many different orchestras, different commissions, different performers. And yet you and I lived in the time, let's say, of Shostakovich, who always, all his life, most of his from 5th to the 13th symphony was performed by one conductor, one orchestra, always Mravinsky. His cello concerto, Rostropovich, violin concerto, sonata, and so forth, Oyster, and that it was and all the quartets were performed by Beethoven Quartet. What is the advantage and disadvantage of those systems? Where do you stand for being, finding your own performer or trying different ones?
Actually, period of Soviet Union, of Shostakovich and others, not so famous maybe composers, it was a period of totally closed society, period of Iron Curtain. So there was no possibility to have a commission for, I don't know, New York Philharmonic or from London Symphony. I mean, otherwise Shostakovich was certainly have this possibility. Anyway, this closed society produced this sort of composing for just X or Y, but not for the whole world. And I think, of course, it was very good opportunity, because you know for whom you are writing, you know just from inside already, you know all details about, you can meet, you can talk, you can discuss, because people, even great performers, did not were just very generous about the time. They could give all the advices. They are always were at disposal of composers who were writing for them, I suppose so. And I myself also had lived a little bit in this period when it was possible really to discuss, and I felt a real interest that it was very important for X or Y that I or somebody else could write for him this or that. For instance, my friend, great percussion player Mark Pekarsky was my friend. Or, well, it's just an example. But now the life is totally changed, and it's not only for composers but also for the performers. I mean, they also need, if they have a possibility, to give a commission to this, to this, to this, to this, because planet became so small. If it's a joke, of course, but I exaggerate. But when Schubert lived, only Vienna knew him. When Bach lived, I don't know, Leipzig.
Only Leipzig knew him. Yeah.
But
absolutely.
Now, if you are not famous in Japan or in Brazil, it means that you're not international.
Yeah.
It's absolutely. That's why it's. I think it's absolutely spoiled system of thinking for me, but it's our life. We cannot do anything against it. So for that reason, I consider myself somewhere in the middle, because I among these great names, I can find name, for instance, the Hilliard Ensemble. I wrote 3 compositions for them. I wrote one opera for Gergiev and viola concerto for him, and the same for Bashmet. I wrote several works, and the same for Guidon. So it means I cannot say that you just wrote once.
Just one. Yeah.
But the tendency is that, and by the way, Amsterdam commissioned me the 2nd opera. It's quite rare. I mean, Animal Farm after Dog's Heart. So it means that I already know. It's fantastic for me because I know the theater, I know the atmosphere, and so. But on the other hand, I don't live in the totally closed society that I don't have a possibility to go one step left or right. So that's why I consider myself something in the middle. But what is really disturbing me sometimes, it's fantastic to receive a commission, of course, for everybody, for every composer. But when you receive it just by email and have to give it in certain time, delay, just administrative context of the commission. This is something which, in spite, of course, it's fantastic when somebody is interested, and but this human contact also step by step disappeared, as we spoke about publishing houses. Also,
the commission is the same.
From more or less more administrative, and Dostoevsky wrote, I cannot write a gambler in time, so I will publish it later. But if you say I cannot play, or I say I cannot write, I don't know what, it's finished actually. It's and by the way, there is a big difference between. I think composers are very privileged if to compare with performers, because if I feel bad, if I have headache, I can sleep. But you have to play even if you have to
go. We have to go.
This is really. I told once to Yuri Bashmet, and he was agree with me. I told him, you have, by all means, you have to stay and to play, even if you feel bad, if you have a big stomach pain. But if I'm in bad condition, in bad shape, I can go to sleep and to forget this working day. This is our little privilege.
But then when the spirit moves you, sometimes you cannot sleep, and you have to, forget the sleep, forget eating. If the creative process takes over, then there's no such thing as, you just have to finish it until it's done. That is also, it's possessive, so
Yes, and especially the quantity of music paper. My vocal score of the last opera is 800 pages.
wow.
If I don't have any, let's say, I don't like word inspiration or enthusiasm, I have to fill this these
Yeah.
pages with
Oh,
something.
there's
So
there's a question just before we finish, and then I'll ask you the very last one. But this one is do you listen to contemporary Russian composers? Do you hear their music? And from a former Soviet Union, what's interesting for you? What's your opinion on that? That just came in.
you mean living composers?
Yeah, living composers. Today's young
Today's.
composers. Yeah, contemporary.
I'm ashamed to say that since I left Russia, I don't have much experience
With them.
listening composers who are my
Right.
colleagues.
Yeah, yeah.
But in former times, we spoke a little bit about it. We created in the end of 80s or in the beginning of 90s the so-called Association for Contemporary Music in Moscow, and with the initiator was Edison Denisov. It was an idea to recreate Association for Contemporary Music one, which was in the period of Roslovets, Mosolov, etc.
Right.
So I how to say. Of course, I was in course of music of my colleagues of this period, of such as we can mention name of Nikolai Kardorf or Dmitry Smirnov, Elena Firtova, Alexander Vustin, Slava Shut, but unfortunately, some of them are already they passed away. Yes, but this music I know, but what came after, to tell the truth, I do not know. Maybe I became, I don't know, mentally lazy, or I feel necessary certain age to concentrate just on myself, very egoistic way.
Understand. I know that you're in touch from time to time, at least, with Leonid Desyatnikov.
Yes, with Leonid Desyatnikov, we are good friends. Yes, of course. And we are totally different, but maybe that's why we are good friends.
Maybe that's right. Yeah, because there's no exactly. And now the last thing before we go, just tell me. I figured, because it's not a secret that you're writing now a big opera. Tell us the subject and when the premiere and where it's supposed to.
Yes, it's already in my opera number 4. Not to count Dog's Heart, I wrote so-called Germania. Serge Darny commissioned me for Opera de Lyon, and this opera was even selected in a short list of opera awards for 2019. Then I wrote opera for Gergiev called Eclipse for Mariinsky Theater, which was not still staged, but only exists in concert version. And yes,
the pit and the pendulum, right?
The pit and the pendulum was already in the pit.
I was already in the pit. Yeah, okay.
Anyway, as for Animal Farm, this idea came from Sophie Delinde, the new director of They Know. It was not my idea. To tell the truth,
the Amsterdam Opera.
Amsterdam Opera. It was not my
Animal Farm. After Orwell. Yeah.
After Orwell. So it came from Mrs. Sophie Delinde. To tell the truth, I was so. I knew only 1984, but I never read before Animal Farm. So for me, it was a chance to read it firstly, and of course I accepted it with pleasure, because it's a continuation of the story of Dog's Heart in a certain point, but even more cruel, because we speak about human being now, not just about nice dog and bad man. And the most important for me, how to say, I hope that the human being will not, the how to say, monkeys of the future will not say we derived from human being, because
That's very good. We derive
because
from,
that's a danger. This is
yeah, there is a danger there. Yeah, it would be very Orwellian,
so
Orwellian scenario.
anti-Darwinism.
Yeah, but I think Orwell would have appreciated this thought,
Yes, yes.
yeah,
So
very much. So that the humans actually, well, by the way they behaved, yeah, the monkey could say, "Well, we come from you guys, so what do you want from us?" Yeah, so what kind of complaints? That's fantastic. And the premiere, and the
so
premiere,
sort of
yes,
the premiere will take place if COVID won't help us to
yes,
postpone it. So I mean, it normally it must be in March 2023 in Amsterdam, starting
2 more years, 2 more
2
years.
years, and this working process starts in January 2023. So, and there are other theaters who are interested already, I know, but it's
Let's talk
wait.
about it. Yeah, that's one premiere is and who will be conducting? Do you know?
I still, it's an open question. At least you know, as I say always, the composer knows, learns all. The last one who
The
knows
last
is the
one to
composer.
know who the singers and the directors are. But the main thing, you have to deliver it. You have to deliver it on time. Well, wishing you all the very, very best. Animal Fun is a fantastic a book to write an opera, and especially now during the pandemic. Thank you so much, Sasha, and because we call
Thank
each
you,
other,
Dima. Thank you.
and it's been a wonderful
Sure.
time with you, and I'm sure a lot of people who will also listen to it later will enjoy many wonderful stories, and they will get to know you and your music. So thank you very much for listening. So of course, don't
Thank you
forget.
very much for the opportunity.
Thanks so much. It was great, and I can't wait to meet you in real life when all this circus will be finished sooner or later. All the best. Thanks so much.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. All the best. Bye bye. Bye.